A very good day to all of you. Last time in the last lecture, we talked about stative and dynamic verbs, that is, those verbs which cannot take a progressive or ing form, and those verbs which can take a progressive or ing form. Today, we'll be talking about sentence or clause elements. As I've already told you, that there are five elements in a sentence or in a clause, which are subject, verb, object, complement, and adverbial. Today we'll be doing about these elements in more detail. So you can look at this page. There are five elements. There are examples. There is a sentence which comprises five units, which are called the elements of sentence or elements of a clause. Look at the example number one. Examples, all these examples we have already done in the previous lecture, but the same examples are being repeated, but for a different purpose, that is to denote the elements of sentence or clause. So number one, the sentence is John carefully searched the room. Now the elements, we have four elements in this sentence. Subject is John, and carefully is adverbial, search verb, and the room is object. So this type is SAVO or the SVOA type of sentence or clause. As I have already told you that clause and sentence both have subject and a verb, a finite verb. A finite verb is the one that agrees with the subject in terms of number and person. A sentence needs to have at least one finite verb. The next sentence is the girl is now a student at a large university. Again, the girl is the subject. We have a verb as is, now an adverbial. A student is a complement. As you know, when we have verbs like be, seen, grow, these are called linking verbs up to, which require a complement. So this is the complement of the subject. And at a large university, that is an adverbial of place. Now, of course, an adverbial of time, we'll be doing about subject, verb, object, complement, adverbial, and the definitions in more detail later on. So the third sentence is his brother grew happier gradually. Again, his brother is the subject, grew, verb, and happier is a complement. Grow is just like the verb that a linking verb which requires a complement, and gradually is an adverbial. So this sentence is of the type SVCA. Again, in the fourth, it rained steadily all day. It is the subject. We is rained steadily, of course, adverbial. All day is also an adverbial. The fifth sentence, he had given the girl an apple. This sentence has some change because we have one subject, we have a helping verb as had, or as we call, as it was, we named it in the last lecture, operator. And the main verb is given. The girl is object, and an apple is also an object, but the girl is an indirect object and apple is a direct object. So we have two objects in this sentence. So the type is SVOO. We can have two objects. The sixth sentence is they make him the chairman every year. Now this sentence has all the five elements which we have been talking about, that a sentence or a clause has five elements: subject, verb, object, complement, adverbial. Complement is either an attribute of the subject or an attribute of an object. If there is an object, the complement is the attribute of the object. So this sentence is of the type SVOCA. Now, the lot of variety is possible in realizing each element of structure. For instance, the subject, object, and adverbial. Till now, there was just one word in place of subject, object, and adverbial, but we can also have a phrase or a complete clause in their places. They themselves have an internal structure comprising constraints of sentences. Let's take another example. She saw that it rained all day. Now let's identify the elements of this sentence. The subject is she, as you can see on this page, and verb is saw. Now after this, she saw that it rained all day. That it rained all day is the entire object. But that it rained all day has its own internal structure. That, of course, is a conjunction that joins two clauses. So that it rained all day is a clause in place of the object. So this object has its own internal structure with a subject, verb, and adverbial. So as you can see that we said that there can be variety. So this type is SVO, where O has its own structure. O has a clause. Before this, what we did, the examples that we did, O just had a word, a noun phrase, but here it has a clause with its own internal structure. Another example, his brother grew happier when his friends arrived. So again, his brother is the subject, grew is the verb, happier a complement, and when his friends arrived. This stands in place of an adverbial, when his friends arrived. Now the when his friends arrived, it has its own internal structure. This complete adverbial has its own internal structure. When is an adverb. When of course is also a conjunct. It joins two clauses. But when we talk about internal structure, then when is acts as an adverb, and his friend's subject, arrived, verb. So this type is SVCA, where A has its own internal structure. A is we. The third example is that she answered the question correctly pleased him. Now that she answered the question correctly is again a clause which has its own internal structure, SVOA. So this clause comes in place of the subject. Subject has its own internal structure, SVOA, subject, verb, object, adverbial. She is the subject, answered is the verb. The question, object, correctly, adverbial. Now this subject, this is the internal structure of the subject. Normally the main clause is SVOA type. So the type is SVOA, whereas it has its own internal structure. So we have seen that this variety is possible for subject, object, and adverbial. Now all the above internal structures are dependent clauses. They cannot stand on their own, and in order to become meaningful, they have to be part of the main clause. Otherwise, as we can see that they are part of the main clause, the independent clause, and these internal structures, besides being dependent clause, also act as OA and S respectively. Now we turn our attention to complements and objects. Now, as far as objects are concerned, we have two types of objects: a direct object and indirect object. We already done an example that he had given the girl an apple. The girl is an indirect object and the apple is a direct object. So we have two objects: the direct object and the indirect object. Again, here we have the same example. He had given the girl an apple. The indirect object mostly precedes the direct object. The indirect object is normally called the recipient, because in most cases the direct object tends to be done or received by the indirect object. Likewise, complements are also of two types: the subject complement and object complement. Complements are actually the attributes. They can be subject attributes or object attributes. So we can have a subject complement or object complement. Now let's have a look at this example. The girl is now a student at a large university. So the girl here is the subject, is the verb, now is the adverbial, and a student is a complement of the subject, because we do not have any object here. So it is complement of the subject, and at a large university is the adverb. Now, we also did object and we also did the complement, but there is a significant difference between complement and object. Whenever in a sentence we have an object, it is possible, in most of the cases, it is possible to passivize that sentence, but we can never have passivization with a complement. So this is a difference between complement and object. The sentence having object can be passivized, but with a complement cannot be passivized. So a student in the above sentence is the subject complement. The second example is his brother grew happier gradually. Again, we have the complement of the subject here. Gradually is the adverbial. This example is, I gave you this example because in place of the complement, in the first case, we have a noun phrase, and in the second case, we have an adjective. So in place of the complement, there can be a noun phrase or an adjective when we have a complement of the subject. Now, let's have another example. They make him the chairman every year. Now, as we have already done this sentence, which has 5 elements: subject, verb, object, complement, adverbial. And as I said that whenever there is an object, the complement following it is the complement of the object. So the chairman in the above sentence is object, complement. Him is the object. The him and the chairman are the same thing. When we have two objects, the indirect object and the direct object are two separate entities. But here, him and the chairman, they are the same. The chairman in the above sentence is the object complement, and which I said that it can be object complement can be there only if there is an object in the sentence. Otherwise, without an object, the complement, if it is there, it is a complement of the subject. For instance, he is the chairman. Now, another example is they painted the house green last year. Now, again, I have given this example because in the second case, we have the complement of the object is an adjective. In the first case, we had the complement of the object as a noun. So we can have the noun or an adjective in place of the complement of an object. Now we come to the verbs, the categories of verbs. There are different types of verb corresponding closely to the different types of object and complement. Sentences which have subject complements have intensive verbs, that is, verbs with subject complements. They are known as the intensive verbs. And these verbs are also linking verbs like be, appear, seem, grow. They are all linking verbs or intensive verbs which require subject complement. And others, they have extensive verbs which can be intransitive or transitive. Now, let's turn our attention to what are these intransitive and transitive verbs. Now, let's take one example. It rained steadily all day. Now, let's identify the elements of this sentence. It is the subject, rained, we have the verb, steadily, an adverbial, and all day again an adverbial. Remember, I told you that although we have only 5 elements, but any of the elements can also be repeated in the same sentence. So we have 2 adverbials here in the sentence. But this sentence is an intransitive verb. Intransitive verbs are those verbs which do not have an object. Like it rained steadily all day, we have an adverbial, we do not have any object. Like another example is the building collapsed. So we just have a subject and a verb, we do not have any object. So such verbs are intransitive verbs and are under the category of extensive verb, but they are intransitive. Now there are extensive verbs which are transitive, that is, which have an object. A sentence has an intransitive verb if there is an object. If there is one object, it is called a monotransitive verb. For instance, John searched the room. Now, again, John is the subject, and we search is the verb, and the room is the object. Now, one thing is, whenever we have SVO, in most of the cases, passivization is possible. John searched the room was searched by John. Had it been complement in this place, passivization would not have been possible. Like we did an example, he is a chairman. Passivization is not possible because there is not the sentence does not have an object. It has a complement. So this is the difference. This is the classic case to distinguish complement from an object. So, and the sentence that has more than one object, they are known as ditransitive. The verbs with two objects, that is an indirect object and a direct object. Example, again we'll have the same example that we already have done earlier. He had given the girl an apple. Now he is the subject. Had, of course, is operator or helping verb. Given as the main verb. The girl is an indirect object, as you know, a recipient. An apple is the thing that has been given to the girl. So we have two objects. Now, another interesting thing about this ditransitive verb, when you have two objects, is that we can passivize in two ways. The girl had been given an apple, or an apple had been given to the girl. So passivization, if we have two objects, there are two ways of passivizing the sentence. So these are the verbs that have two objects. They are ditransitive verbs. Now we come to the third category, that is the complex transitive verbs, which have an object and a complement. Now, example is they make him the chairman every year. Now, they subject make verb, him object, the chairman is the complement of the object, and every year, of course, is an adverbial. Now, because we have an object and a complement in this sentence, so such verbs which have an object and a complement, they are known as complex transitive verbs. So we have the categories of verbs that we did are intensive verbs, which have just complement of the subject, and extensive verbs. All the other verbs are extensive verbs, which are intransitive or transitive. Intransitive verbs are those verbs which do not have an object, and transitive verbs, monotransitive, one object, ditransitive, two objects. There are indirect object and direct object. Complex transitive, we have complement and an object. Now, there is one more distinction between verbs in relation to whether they admit the aspectual contrast of progressive and non-progressive. Here are some examples of verbs which take the progressive or ing form. We did this in the first lecture also. The first example is John carefully searched the room. So if can we have a progressive form for this? John was carefully searching the room. Of course, we can have a progressive form because there is some action involved. But there are certain verbs in which action is not involved, like we saw in the case of stative verbs, which do not allow the progressive form, which do not admit the ing form. The second example is it rained steadily all day. Now, can we convert it into progressive? Yes, we can. It was raining steadily all day. So we do not have any problem in these two sentences that in order to convert them into progressive or ing, they easily take the progressive and the ing forms. Now, in some cases, this ing and progressive forms are not possible, like we did earlier also. That is, they are the stative verbs which describe a state. For instance, the girl is now a student at a large university. So we cannot say the girl is now being a student. That sentence is impossible because normally states, they do not take an ing form. It is it's just impossible. So we cannot say that girl is now being a student. Now, another sentence is John knew the answer. In this case also, we cannot say that John was knowing the answer. So these are the verbs which do not take the ing or the progressive form. They are the stative verbs. The verbs that either habitually or in certain cases will not admit the progressive, as in the second pair of the sentence, they are called the stative. And when the verbs admit progressive or ing form in the first pair of sentences on this page, They are the dynamic verbs. But it is normal for verbs to be dynamic, even in the few cases that are almost stative. They can usually be given a dynamic use for a specific purpose or occasionally. For example, he is being a nuisance, or he's being naughty. Here, it's a progressive form. Being was not possible with the case that the girl is now a student. The girl is now being a student. That was impossible. But here we have an example where being is possible. He is being a nuisance, or he is being naughty again. Verb be is normally stative. Uh, as in the like we did in this example, the girl is now a student at a large university. So we did about the in this lecture about the stative and dynamic verbs. We did about transitive, intransitive objects, and we did about the sentence elements. We'll be doing more about all these sentence structures in the next lecture. Thank you very much.